we can make any change we want at any time. And it is never too late to make change of any proportion. You can change your career. You can change your relationships. You can move to a whole other part of the world. You can do all the tiny and big things. It's all available to you, and it will not come without some fear.
Hello and welcome back, or welcome to The Messy Middle, a podcast designed for people tired of chasing external methods to resolve our internal messiness. I'm your host, Andrew Horsfield. The purpose of this podcast is to have conversations with leaders and experts in their field who share personal and practical strategies that you can implement to advance your career, company, and life. You can find out more or listen to previous episodes at andrewhorsfield.com/podcast. Based on the average age here in Australia, I have 1,506 Mondays left to live. For some people, this mathematical mortality might cause some anxiety or discomfort. But for Jodi Wellman, having a consciousness about death gives us the opportunity to live our life more fully. Jodi is the author of the book You Only Die Once and founder of 4,000 Mondays, a consulting practice that's designed to help people live more fully in order to avoid the coulda, shoulda, wouldas that can sometimes occur when we sleepwalk through life. In this conversation, Jodi shares why satisfaction and content are hard for us to find, how boundaries may help manage a busy life, when habits and routines don't serve us, how we can start to take a risk or try something new, and so much more. Packed with personal anecdotes and practical insights, this conversation with Jodi will really resonate with anyone who wants to live more boldly by adding the two ingredients that can help create a more compelling life: meaning and vitality. If you want to reach the end of your life with less regret, you'll enjoy this conversation with author, coach, and best friend of the Grim Reaper, Jodi Wellman. Jodi, welcome to The Messy Middle. It's awesome to have you on. Based on your website calculator, I have 1,507 days left, so I reckon we should jump straight in and get on with the conversation. What do you think?
Well, clearly time is ticking, and we don't have a Monday to waste with you here, pal.
No, ticking for us all. So for those who will be wondering what we're talking about and maybe thinking that we're being a little bit morbid, can you explain that mathematical mortality and the concept of 4,000 Mondays?
Oh, I am happy to. Thank you for asking. Yeah, 4,000 Mondays is what I named my company because that's roughly all we get. That's the bad news. It's kind of code for around 80 years, you know? And my entire life philosophy now has been oriented around this idea of counting how many Mondays we have left. And no, it's not to be totally morbid. No, just a little bit, like an appropriate amount of morbid in order to kick us into action. So if you want me to walk through the math, I mean, if you identify as male, start with 78 and then minus your current age and then multiply that by 52. If you identify as female, start with 83. We get some bonus years, yes. Minus your current age and then multiply by 52. And if you don't identify with either, start with 80 and minus your age and then multiply by 52. And that is your total number of average Mondays left on the planet in your life.
Yeah. And when we put that into perspective of, dinners with family or, holidays away together or those sort of things, it can start to look, which is probably the point of what you're saying with the book, is to start to put life into the now rather than the later.
I love the way you summarize that. I'm going to write that down. I also think, the science behind it, for those of us nerds out there who care, it's called temporal scarcity. And it is rooted in the idea that whenever we have an asset, whether it's a diamond or, a special menu item or, our lives, and we highlight the fact that there is actually a limitation. It's finite. It's rare. It's temporary. Our perception of how valuable it is completely changes, right? Because if you knew you were going to live forever, well, first of all, we wouldn't be doing this stupid math, which would be good, but we would be thinking, I'll just get to that later, like back to your idea about now versus later. We need that sort of shake I want to gently shake you by the shoulders and say, wait a minute, this time is ticking down. And this is precisely why we need to start taking our time more seriously with more of that sense of urgency and priority and action.
Yeah, so it's not a morbid look at death, even though for those who will get the book, and we'll obviously mention your book, You Only Die Once, and we'll put that in the show notes. But I mean, you've got a lot of great quirky illustrations in there using the Grim Reaper as a bit of a sidekick to part of your message, which I really enjoyed.
Thank you.
But it's not a morbid look about death. It's really about promoting that gift of life. That's something that I think is worth reinforcing for people, even though you've just done that articulately. But I want to reinforce that as the core message of the book, right?
Well, I really appreciate that. And by the way, I did decide early on that if I am going to have the Grim Reaper be my sidekick, I did need to defang death a little bit. And so I figured, well, doodling him in all sorts of compromising and uncompromising positions would absolutely make him seem, quite approachable. So that is on purpose. And you're really right. Like all the discussion about the end is only in service of saying, well, wow, let's talk then about how we might want to live like we mean it. So yes, it is all a means to an end. There we go again, always talking about the end. Look at me.
And are you aware of Bronnie Ware's work here in Australia? She's a palliative care work about her book, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, which is a fairly common book now. I think it's been quoted in a number of books around, when we get to the end of our life, whenever that may be, the things that we end up looking back on and regretting are very rarely the things that we're spending our time on, and not just our time, but the angst and worry and stress that it causes us. That we, how do we rectify all of that in our current reality?
Yeah, right. I love the question. And yeah, I got onto Bronnie Ware's work early on. It was part of what maybe inspired me in early days, years ago, about this idea about wanting to live a regret-free life. One of the things that I think might be helpful is this ability to discern the two different kinds of regrets. Because I think that,
I love that.
On one hand, many of us tend to ruminate initially over the regrets of commission, they're called. And those are just the dumb things we did. And trust, there ain't no shortage of those things, right? Like things we wish if we could go back would be like, I would not have cheated on my math test, or I would not have, taken that stupid job in that part of the country, whatever it was, right? But those things research shows, this is based in empirical research also, not just anecdotal experience, both. When we're on our deathbeds, those things don't tend to really cause us a lot of heartburn. What really does would be the regrets of omission, which are the regrets about the paths we didn't take. Like the dream you had, like, I wanted to start the business, but I never did. Or I wished I had applied for that really big job that might have taken me to that, to London. Or I wish that I had done, I wish I'd even just spent more time on the floor with the kids playing rather than on my phone. Like the things that we wished we had either spent more time on, or maybe a character trait, like I'd wished I'd been bolder, maybe taken more risks. Those are the things. So the whole point I'm mentioning all this for is because when we do this exercise, which is what I am, wanting every single person on the planet to do after counting their Mondays, is to imagine, sorry about your luck, but you're dying right now. You're on your deathbed. And what would be on your list of those regrets of omission? Again, those, I call them coulda, shoulda, wouldas. What would be on that list? Because the best part is they're you're not dead yet. You seem quite alive over there that I'm looking at you, right? Like we get to identify those pregrets, like I call them regrets in the making. And then we get to course correct them and then start living a life that might get us to the end and think, you know what? I kind of killed it. I did the thing. I tried for the job. I applied, or I started the business. And whether it worked or didn't, there's a very, very specific satisfaction of trying.
In your experience in both researching and writing the book and doing the work you're doing now, is it a lack of self-awareness from people in terms of just not having a consciousness about some of those things, and so there's just this inkling feeling that they don't quite, it's there but they don't quite know?
Yeah.
Or is it sort of, I know what it is but I just don't have courage, resources, time, money, whatever it is to actually go and grab it? Or is it equal in both?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
You can't tell, but I'm all giddy over here. I love your questions. They're so spot on and smart. It is about a third.
Thank you.
And some of these can overlap. So, okay. So for about a third of the, Gen Pop out there, we're just not giving ourselves the time to fathom what would be cool. Like what kind of life do I even want? Like what would be on my bucket list? Or what are the things that I might regret? Or wait a minute, I lost the plot. Like, yeah, I always did want to write that poetry book, or I always did want to go and volunteer for those kids down there. We get so busy and swept up in our day-to-day lives that we actually we don't have our finger on the pulse, to use our, dead or alive language, of what it is that might be great. And so that is absolutely true for about a third of people. And then for the people who are cognizant, these are my dreams. Like, this is a goal I have. I really want to do this. About 2/3 of them aren't taking action because of exactly what you said. It's scary. And even though we might be sitting around going, I think there's more out there for me. I would really love to, start this little tiny nonprofit in my town, or I would really love to, go and plan this really cool family reunion. It means that it's going to take a little bit of time. It's going to take us out of our comfort zone, our usual routine, of work, dinner, couch. Trust me, I know that schedule very well. I love that schedule, but it does not love me back. So I think it is both. It's a great question. We haven't conjured up the dream, but even for those of us who have, we're just super scared, and it takes courage. What do you think? Do you feel that way when you're, because you do a lot of research, you got the idea.
Yeah, look, I think that bucket you've just mentioned would probably, if you think of the traditional bell-shaped curve, I think that's, from my experience with the work I do, where most people would sit. Mm-hmm. It's not a not knowing. Mm-hmm. It's a I know, but I don't know how, or I know how, but I just feel so restricted by fear. And because I think for a lot of people, there is a genuine fear about, well, how do I go and do that and still have a successful career, or still pay my bills, or still manage time with when it's spread across 500 things. And so I think there's some legitimate parts that people are scared by, but there's, of course, always action where we need to find out what matters to us and at what level and what we want to give our time to. And that is part of that reflection piece I really like that you're talking about, because I feel that we don't do that enough. So for me, I work on a philosophy of plan yearly and execute quarterly. And so that execution, part of that is that reflection of, okay, where am I at with that? And this is just life in general, not just what am I trying to achieve and succeed in, but how am I living my life? How do I feel about myself? What's my energy like? So that helps to every quarter, every 3 months, essentially check in with that and make that course correction, which I think is the important part of, or an important part of what you're talking about.
I so love what you're talking about. And that is the thing that you know full well. So many of us don't do it. Or we do it for a while and then we just fall off the wagon, because often we do that. And it means coming back in and getting in touch again, and saying, wait, how are things going? And, wow, I am proud of myself that I did that thing. I registered for that course and I learned something new, and that was really great and exciting. And then, oh, wait a minute, I've gotten back into the lull again of, the routine, for example. And when we do ourselves the favor of taking, even if it's a half-day retreat day, okay, you can't spare half a day? Fine, an hour at the coffee shop or over your favorite alcoholic beverage, whatever floats your boat. But taking the time to stop and assess, that's crucial. The line I've always loved by Nietzsche, it's like, man is the only animal who has to be encouraged to live. And it takes courage to, live that unlived life. I think Seneca said something like that. We know what we're up against. To your point, it's often not the failure of imagination. It's just dreaming it and doing it.
Yeah. What misconceptions do you think we have about this whole happiness and success pursuit?
Well, I've studied positive psychology, and so I did it at the University of Pennsylvania, and now I'm an assistant instructor in the master's program, and I am obsessed with this question because it is full of myths and misnomers, right? I don't know if anybody has talked about in your show before I listened to the hedonic treadmill. That's come up. That idea about hedonic adaptation also, that, we believe oftentimes that the thing that we've sought after is going to be the thing that delivers. And sometimes we can call it even, destination addiction. Like, I will be happy when, I get that job, or I lose that weight, or I feel this fit, or I, get that makeover, or I earn enough money, or I get that car. I mean, obviously the list goes on and on and on. And we dupe ourselves, and we do think that maybe that's the thing that's going to make us happy. And here's the thing. We might even achieve a goal. So I was just talking about a lot of extrinsic things, but oftentimes there is an idea like, wow, I published the book. And the experience of the satisfaction can be fleeting. And then the hedonic treadmill is that we need to keep kind of upping the ante and finding new ways, because it won't last long. The new car smell will fade, right? The moving to the beach, the sunrise, unfortunately, you're going to kind of adapt to it and get tired of it. So we need to be creative and in touch, not just with bigger highs, because I think that also is the trap. It's like, well, I've got to now go after a bigger goal. Maybe that's good for you. But for many of us, it's about tuning into the really small, simple things in our lives that are all around us already, that maybe we have just sort of overlooked, because we're not recognizing that, life is what's lived in between your weekends and vacations. Those are great too. But like, what is something in your day-to-day life that you can stop and truly savor and say, wow, back to the idea that you have 1,507 Mondays left. Okay, I've got 1,814 as of this week. It's that idea that, wow, like I get to be here, and that ratcheting up the appreciation for life. And I get to be here, and wow, what, I am so grateful that I get to sit here and I get to have my coffee outside in the morning and just look at the odd bird. The bird may not be special, but it's just, I get to do this and savoring the small things.
And that's one of the things, I mean, you endorse two things around meaning and vitality, both being important. Can you maybe share the role that they play and why both of them are important for people who are listening and just percolating over what we're talking about?
The science of well-being has broken down kind of happiness and well-being into two different camps. The two camps overlap. But I talk about it in my language as widening life with vitality. And that's what's known as the hedonic side of well-being. And this is the fun stuff. It's like traditional happiness. It's like all the pleasure, all the, fun excursions. You're going to go on, the road trips, the drinks, the laughter, all the fun. Great. And we need that. We need that in whatever dose is going to be happy for you, right? We have different needs. The offsetting counterweight to that is the deepening of life associated with meaning and purpose. And in the well-being world, it's known as the eudaimonic dimension of well-being. And this has to do with that sense of having purpose, being connected to people, having really good, meaningful relationships. Maybe it's tied to spirituality, if that matters to you. It's about, sometimes the difference can be about like doing good versus feeling good. And oh my goodness, there's a time and a place for both. And sometimes they do overlap. If you're engaging in a hobby and you are, let's say, going on a really great family trip, there's going to be lots of fun. Oh, that's hedonic. That's widening. That is so much fun. The roller coasters, whatever you're going to do. But then there's also maybe some meaning about the memories that you're making and the values you're imparting on kids, or, that special time together. And so those are ways that we can actually look at our lives. And I'm a fan of using this framework. Intuitively, we typically know, scale of 1 to 10, how wide is your life right now with vitality? You can come up with a number pretty easily. Scale of 1 to 10, how deep is your life right now with that sense of meaning? And we can pretty much come, and that's the starting point. Is like, well, let's diagnose which one feels a little flat, and maybe they're both at 9. Good for you. You probably want one to get to 9.3. And what do you want? And so now it's about, well, what's one small thing you can do to get there?
One of the questions I think that helps with what you're talking about now, which I thought was a really powerful question for people to ask, is, would you recommend your life to someone else? I mean, I think it puts it really squarely in maybe doing that assessment of saying yes, because, and so there's a recognition of what's being done well, or not really, and there's a chance to recalibrate, immediately, because there'll be certain things that come up. I thought it was a really nice question to ask people to reflect on where they are right now.
Well, I appreciate that. I try to find little goofy ways, because we just need to jar ourselves, with new thought experiments. You've just reminded me, I've already mentioned Nietzsche once. I'm going to give him another shout out, that guy. He had this thing called the eternal return. And it was this notion where Imagine for some strange reason, whether it's a spell that was cast upon you, whatever, you are now destined to live your entire life as you've known it from the beginning, the day you were born until today, again and again and again on repeat for all of eternity. So what that means is that all the highs, all the lows, all the boring moments, all the squanderous times, all the everything. And as Nietzsche noted, that thought will either delight you or it will crush you. And it's just another way of saying, and now at this point, again, like I could care less about water under the bridge. Back to the regrets of commission. If maybe up till now we look at our lives, and I've got a lot of time where I've squandered my time to various vices and issues and stupid eating disorders in ways where I'm like, I wouldn't want to redo that per se. Now, depending how you look at it, it's shaped, who we are today. Our foibles and problems only do shape us. But all we have is moving forward, right? Our remaining Mondays. They can be informed by our past, but we can say for 1,507 to go, or for me, 1,814 to go, how do I want it to be? And now we get to put energy into what's coming up. And you asked about a happiness myth. A lot of people think that, it's sort of preordained, but a lot of research, as much as 40% of our happiness is up to us and our own intentional actions that we choose to take. 50% is genetics. Thanks, Dad. Thanks, Mom. Good or bad. And some of it does have to do with our current circumstance in life, but it's a hefty chunk where we have agency. We are the ones behind the wheel of our lives, and it's just up to us to, again, dream about what we want and then summon up the courage to maybe take one step forward.
And how do we do that? Because I am thinking about people listening who are going, you guys don't know what my life's like. I'm up at 5:30 or I'm up at 6. I've got a baby to feed. Or I've got toddlers to get to kinder. I've then got 300 deadlines and a boss who's on the back about producing something. And then, I have no lunch hour. I grab a coffee if I'm lucky. I have 2 wheeze a day if I'm afforded them. And then I get home and the demands are back on. We get dinner, get people to bed and so I'm finding myself on the couch. I can't exercise. I'm just swamped and overwhelmed. Or overcommitted. What would you say to that person who's like, that's great, Andrew. That's great, Jodi, but you just don't get my life.
Right.
How do I appreciate all this when I have no time for myself?
Yeah. I love the question because it's so real. And here's where I'm excited by the answer. It's because I do think that we tend to be all or nothing thinkers. And we think, well, if I can't go and have the full on vacation or the full on experience, or, oh, you're talking about doing a concert in the park. Well, I can't do that and have my entire Saturday devoted towards this fun day. Most people can't. We can sprinkle our lives with cool things every now and then, and even the busiest, committed entrepreneurs and parents and so on can find time for some of those things over the year. But this is back to the good news, which is the well-lived life is often in back to those simple moments and simple pleasures. And that is, again, one of the secrets of the well-being world. It's that, all right, you mentioned in your example, all I can do is squeak out, barely go and get a cup of coffee, or I come home and there's the rigmarole of dinner and I sort of crash on the couch at night. Sometimes it's about identifying and saying, okay, what if you're going to spend, say, an average of 38 minutes before you fall asleep between kids in bed and whatnot and crash time? This is an opportunity. And I worked with a team just in the last 2 weeks where that was the case for several of the team members. And they identified, I used to love to read murder mysteries, one woman said. And another gentleman was like, oh, I forgot I was reading these biographies. And so they've committed, rather than doing the zombie zone out of the TV, they're like, what if even just 1 or 2 nights a week, I just read a chapter. And then he said, even if I even fall asleep reading half the chapter, I will wake up feeling better knowing that I did something for myself rather than, again, that glazed over routine. Is this life-changing? Of course, I'm not trying to exaggerate and say that reading half a chapter of a murder mystery is going to change your life. But what it does do is it sends yourself a signal that you've identified something that brings you a bit of joy. You replaced a little bit of time. And, dare I even say, because you made a point about overcommitting. And that sometimes we are our own lovely, sweet, worst enemies. We mean well. We want to help other people and it makes us feel good, but we forgot about ourselves in the mix. And so maybe what that means is, bowing out and saying, okay, I'm looking at my calendar. I've got a committee meeting on Thursday night. Maybe it means making a choice to say, I'm actually going to use that. And the kids and I, we're going to go out for ice cream. And we're going to do something silly. Or, we're going to have, breakfast for dinner, and we're going to shaking up a routine is the simplest way to add more novelty and experience into life. So, okay, it sounds like you're describing the busy parent or the busy professional, both. I'm going to encourage, this is not about overhauling your life. It's about making subtle changes to the routines you have, taking a different drive home, trying a different lunch, saying, we're going to have, Friday night, we're going to, order something we've never ordered before. Those are the little things that we underestimate that actually add a little more joie de vivre to life.
Yeah, love what you're talking about in the sense that for me anyway, my view, small scales. We often want to go from zero to success in one step and we get burned out along the way because it's just too far a jump, where that small little incremental thing is something, that we can do in the time. And so you've mentioned that before. If you don't have an hour, 15 minutes, if you don't have 15, do 5. I've even talked to leaders before about just shutting down for 3 minutes when you're overwhelmed and just go somewhere quiet into a room where no one knows where you are, turn off the lights, and 3 minutes can seem quite a long time. It's those small things that when you find, and I like the way you mentioned that around, it builds the muscle of how do I do this rather than I can't, or seeing the barrier. You start to see, obviously, the opportunity, not the obstacle. It's a really nice reinforcement, Jodi.
Good. You just reminded me too, we all have domains of life, right? So you've got our work, we've got our social life, it could be family and friends. There's our hobbies. Oh yeah, I remember those. There's our health, finance, your environment around you, spirituality, learning and growth. You might identify on that little kind of wheel of life. That's traditionally what it's known as. You might say, man, I'm busy and my social life has floundered. That's true for many busy adults. It's, our social life tends to get smaller and smaller as we age. Even though, back to the regrets of the dying, both Bronnie Ware, but as well as the empirical studies and research do prove that, it's the lamentation of, I let my friendships languish at the end. That's the kind of thing where, again, we have this all or nothing, I don't have time to go and do brunch, or I don't have time to go and do the full road trip with my, what? We underestimate. Send a text. I'm thinking of you. It's been a minute. And then send a memory photo. Oh my gosh, remember when we did this thing back when we had time? And you send a goofy photo of you guys, I don't know, raising a glass or having fun together. You know what? Did that take anything more than 14 seconds? Nope. But you get the text back, probably at some point that day. And you have that little tiny glow. And that's all that life is just one tiny little bit that carries us to the next.
And tell me, one of the things that people at this point of our conversation may endorse is that routine rituals, optimize life, and you sort of have a counter view or partly a counter view to that in the book. Can you tell us a little bit about not over routining and ritualizing our life? Because I think it's a nice little warning label to the conversation.
Ooh, a warning label. I like that. Warning, do not become the routine robot. There's the risk. Yeah. As comforting as routines and habits are, the risk is that we succumb to them and we live our lives on autopilot. And autopilot is the enemy here. Really, it's so much of what we're talking about. It's that, that feeling you get when you're just you don't know where the time went. It's sort of like all of a sudden it's a new month and you feel like I'm just going through the motions. I get it. And back to your point about some listeners, I get it, because there are some times where you're just hanging on for dear life. And that is a successful month, is that you did not drown under all that water. Good for you. Keep it up, right? And for the rest of us, when we are having a month where it's not as insane as it was last month, these are the opportunities where evaluate what you do every day that's mindless. And I'm not suggesting we can't have every single routine be busted up. We have to go through sometimes the morning routine to get ready, or to get the kids on the bus, or to get to school, or to do the thing. Sometimes that just needs to be automated so that we don't lose our minds. Love that. And I'm also going to suggest that There are some things that we've done where we've lost a little bit of the fun and the pizzazz in life, more of the vitality. So it could be that, it comes down to the same dinners that we're cooking over and over. Or if there is a date night that you might go on with your partner, it kind of might fall into the same kind of routine versus just totally shaking it up and planning a surprise, totally something different. It could have to do with the way you orchestrate your lunch, or even if you're a leader and you're organizing a meeting and it's your Wednesday afternoon status update meeting. What if you shook it up? What if you had a completely different agenda? What if you had a completely different way of, hey, we're going to recognize people today? Just anything that jars you, anything that creates something new. And that's why travel is so important for us, because we're not only exposed to all new senses, literally all new five senses, but we're also just trying to make sense of the new environment we're in, our hotel, trying to figure out our new routine. What time do we wake up tomorrow? We need that in order to feel alive. And it is the taking for grantedness, the autopilot that day to day we run the risk of. Familiarity breeds contempt. And so one more corny phrase to take this puppy home. If variety is the spice of life, let's just put in a little dose of the right spice every now and then to shake it up.
Yeah. Yeah, really, really nice. We spoke earlier about it takes a little bit of risk to try new things, to maybe access this, because we might have to let something go to put this into our life, or we, as you said, we don't do the normal routine. We go out and say we're going to do something different with our kids, or not going to watch the normal show, and what do we replace that with and things. How do we balance this life of meaning and vitality with responsibility?
One thing I think has to do with paying attention to your own needs. And you alluded to it earlier, almost like when you do that check-in kind of quarterly, recognizing like your own desire for newness, your own desire for more of the fun or more of the depth. Like it's a very relative thing. A lot of people are kind of quiet. They like a pretty calm existence. They're not interested in all the bells and whistles. So for them, the idea about having a very full calendar and filling their life with all this vitality, and I call it astonishingly alive. It sounds like it needs to look a certain way or include a certain number of trips and meals and all the things. And that is actually, it couldn't be farther from the truth. I think it's about paying attention to the dose. Like, how often do you need and want, in order to feel alive, some social interaction? How often do you need and want some kind of a hobby that intersperses into your month? How often do you need and want something that feels good for your body, some kind of health thing? And when we look at that and you recognize you can't fit everything in. That's why bucket lists, you'll always have something left on it when you die. It's that for some of us, like for me, I'm more of an introvert. I can really only handle one social thing a week. And beyond that, this is in addition to interacting for my job and doing conversations like this, which is lovely. But if I'm going to go out and have a, lunch out or a drink out or an outing, I just can't really handle more than that. And I just know that's my dose. And so paying attention to what is the right frequency and intensity of the thing you're looking for. So that's one tip for people. The question you asked also reminded me of that proverbial, like, what would you do if you had, a week left to live? And it can be mildly instructive, right? Like if everything you gravitate towards is, oh my gosh, I have to be with my family the whole time, or, oh my gosh, I have to try all the roller coasters in my country, or I have to go and eat all the hot dogs, or I don't know, whatever it is that interests you. It could be interesting to note what you value, but it's not realistic. And so back to that idea about calibrating, like a life that feels well lived, which may involve spending time and energy and money on experiences and things, but then there's the tension point between, but I have to save some money and some of my energy and time, to live in retirement or longer. My question for that can be helpful is looking at your regrets. What would you regret? Would you regret it if you did it? And let's say, you went on the around the world cruise. Would you regret doing that and squandering all your money and having no money left when you came back? Would that actually make you not like your life? Great memories, great photos, but was it worth it? Would you regret that? Or if there's an opportunity that presents itself or you are thinking about the around the world cruise, would you regret not doing it? And not because you would fathom that, next year I could learn that I had cancer and I've got 1 year left to live. No, just in general, would you regret doing it or would you regret not doing it? And often that can be helpful to help make a decision.
Can you give us some practical examples about how you do this in your own life? How with the moments that you pick up that meaning or vitality and have an awareness to it just on a regular basis?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Well, I have a menu that I created for myself, and it's on two dimensions. So it's a list of things that I love to do that bring me a widening sense of vitality in life, and things that make me feel deeper with meaning. And I'm going to be very clear here that this is different from a bucket list. Okay, so this is stuff that I can actually reasonably do in my day-to-day life. Not every day, but one example of a widening activity that just makes me feel like it's super fun is browsing through like a spice store or baking store where I can go and get little trinkets and things to make little baking because I like to bake. Well, that's not going to fit in my everyday, but if I have a day where I recognize and I go, you know what, I could sneak out for an hour. I could do that. So at least I've got a menu of choices. By the way, most days I don't give myself the hour, which to me is admittedly a little bit of a flaw in my operating system because I work for myself and I can darn well carve out an hour if I want to, but I'm just a little bit too traditional about my working hours. Are not that flexible, which, is another thing I would just challenge us on in this world where we get to be a little more flexible than we used to be. Are all hours created equal? Can we sneak out and go for an omelet, go for a breakfast in the morning just because? I think we can. But regardless, I have a menu of things. And when I have a lack of imagination because I'm so busy and I've got 20 minutes between now and my next meeting, and then rather than do my default, which is always going to be check my messages and catch up on emails, I got to do it, but it's not really life affirming. Well, I could look at my list and go, wait a minute, you know what I would love to do right now? And I might go and I might decide to, one of the things I love to do is rifle around my stationery drawer and find just a really cute little postcard that I might send to a friend. And it gives me the joy of knowing that I've done that. And it took me probably 4 minutes tops. And it just feels so great on my walk that night. I'll put it in the mailbox and off it'll go. And I just feel a little bit better about life. That's a choice that I could do in that moment that brings me, in that instance, that brings me vitality. It's fun to do. I might do a doodle on the postcard, but it also brings me meaning because I know I'm going to strengthen that relationship.
And it's a practice, right? I mean, a lot of what you're saying and the conversation goes back to the fact of the person needs to make this as a choice in their life to be conscious of this and do this as a practice, not just a theory or a dinner conversation of I should, but taking these steps and having that agency to be able to go, where do I start and what am I going to commit to starting with? For people listening who want to do that and want to make that a practice in their life, is there anything you would suggest as a reasonable starting point? I mean, you've suggested some already in the conversation we've had, but is there things that you find helpful for people who are making that initial step and start?
Yeah. The first step is I call it diagnosing the dead zones. And so in the book, there's a pre-mortem, which asks about 9,080 questions, getting you to think about your current life and across all the domains of life. Like, where are things feeling really alive? Hot tip, do more of those things. That's just easy, low-hanging fruit in positive psychology. Maximize what's working for you. But the other one is finding what's in a dead zone or flattened out. And all we can really ever do is just one thing at a time in life. Otherwise, we risk overwhelm. And I do the same thing where I think I want to hear 19 things. Take a breath. What's one? And so identifying, for example, if it was the social, let's use the example of, say you feel like maybe your leisure life has gone flat and it needs some resuscitation. That's super common for busy adults. It's again, back to having the time to stop. Not having the time. I'm going to correct myself. Making the time. We can all make 5 minutes happen in between I'm going to catch you because we all know we do the thing where we scroll through our news feed or we scroll through social media. And when we add up that time, I'm not going to tell you to get off it if you like it, but it's just that you could probably eke out 5 minutes to stop and go, what would be a list of things that I would really like to do if I had an extra hour a week? Or even an hour a month or more, and make that list. Because again, this is about giving ourselves a fighting chance. We have to record our dreams and our hopes and our ideas. And when it comes to our leisure time, our recreation, the fun stuff, Often, again, as adults, we think we have to reinvent the wheel. We have to find a new passion. I need a new hobby. And maybe if something's been calling you, oh my goodness, give it a try. Go and register for the ukulele class, or go and figure out what the heck pickleball is, or go and do the thing that's going to get you excited. But for most of us, we're just still trying to find our way, and we don't even like find an old hobby that you used to like to do. And we have them. It's like, oh, I back to this workshop I led last week. The group of them, and they were like, I used to play this musical instrument, or someone would say, I used to sketch, and I still have a sketchbook. I know exactly where it is. And of course, we were all like, you better bring the sketch to the meeting tomorrow and show us. Someone else, I really want to get back to writing, or I would love to go and register for that course and learning how to glass blow. If it's new, if it's old, doesn't matter, but finding one thing that might be interesting to you, and without getting overwhelmed, my recommendation is always, what is one small thing you could do? What's one step? Is it registering for the course online? Because trust me, that's going to give you a lift. Is it planning the date when you're going to have the wedding renewal vow party that you're going to invite your friends to in August? Plan the date. It's like taking one step that's going to make you feel like you gave a shit about your life.
I like that, Jodi, and I'd add for people listening is if you can't find it next week, then start next month. Give yourself the runway, because it's often hard to say, oh, the calendar's full for next week. So don't have that pressure of choose a month away to go, that's my starting date, and I'm putting it from that date onwards when the calendar's not full to say that's the time I'm carving out for myself, or that's when I'm going to start, or so it doesn't have this pressure of trying to squeeze it into already busy time.
I think that's such a great point. Like giving ourselves grace. Like, here I am. I'm all like, time's ticking, but it doesn't mean we have to be like, this is about creating urgency without panic. It's about creating urgency with hopefully a little bit more of that electric excitement. Like, I get to be here. I get to register for tennis. And okay, this month is shot, but September is my month, baby. I'm doing it. Right. I love that.
From my perspective, I think what also helps is that if we're giving ourselves these times that you're endorsing and consistently been endorsing, small or large, so the meaning or the vitality, it allows us to then dial in to be present to the other stuff too, to say, okay, I am at work, I have got stuff to do, but I can give myself attention to that because I know tonight or the weekend or whatever, there's other bits of my life, or if I'm in the morning meeting, I know at lunchtime when I catch up with those 3 people for our monthly thing, it allows you to be really present in every single area of your life, as opposed to just be carving out this one moment where we have vitality, as opposed to having this integrity for all of our life.
Oh, what a great point. Yeah, we start to notice more. We start to get attuned. Not to mention, even when this exercise comes up about, writing out some of your various lists, like your menu of things that make you happy. And it could be across the spectrums, right? So you could have a vitality list, you could have a meaning list, you could have your bucket list of cool things you would like to do before you do in fact die. When we're starting to create these lists, most people have a panic look on their face because they don't know the answer to it. I just had a conversation with a friend who realized that she didn't know what it was. Like, she had to answer a questionnaire about what lights you up, what makes you happy. And she was totally at a loss. She had to phone a friend to be like, what do I like? Like, what, she didn't even know, because we've lost touch sometimes. We're too busy, or we're caregiving for other people. So when you're starting on these lists, don't be alarmed that you don't actually have fodder yet. But the cool part is what you're saying is, like, when you start to tune in and notice, yeah, that thing I do, that does make me feel like a real sense of meaning. And you might come home and add it to your list, like, meditating. I'm going to add meditating to my meaning list because that feels pretty spiritually enhancing for me, or whatever it is. We start to build that list, which is great.
Joe, you've written the book. You've worked a lot in positive psychology. Before you even did that, you had a whole career yourself in a corporate space and setting. What are the things that you, having written the book now and speaking about this a lot with 4,000 Mondays, what are the things that you wish people knew that they don't know, that we haven't mentioned, or that that we maybe haven't discussed in enough depth that you'd like to share just to finish off?
Well, I love the question because also the way you put it in context, and it makes me think about how, I have traditionally been a really big chicken shit. So I have all these ideas, but then I just don't have the courage to execute. And so I stayed in my corporate job for a few years too long because I just didn't know what to do. And instead I just I pretended I faked it very well. Everybody thought I loved it, but I was just hoping to be saved. And you know what? No one came out, flew in the window and saved me, right? I had to figure it out myself and take the uncomfortable leap and believe that I could make something out of the next thing. And I did change my career into leadership development and coaching. And then at that point, I wanted to start 4,000 Mondays and I was scared. And so it's about then getting up the gumption and having the courage to take that risk. And so the thing I would look back on and or give advice on and or is that back to the idea about life being so short, we can make any change we want at any time. We are not dead yet. And it is never too late to make a change of any proportion. You can change your career. I know a woman who went and got her PhD in her 70s. She's rocking it. You can change your education, your career. You can change your relationships. You can move to a whole other part of the world. And even on the smaller scale, you can slightly change your diet. You can slightly change your routine. You can get a makeover. You can do all the tiny and big things that you get to do in this life. It's all available to you, and it will not come without some fear. If you wait for fear to not be there, then you're just going to have to wait until you're buried in the ground. And even then, I still think fear follows us into the grave. It's just going to have to be part of it, and we just do it anyways. And that is the exquisite joy of a life worth living, is that, again, we gave a shit and we gave it a go.
Yeah, what a great place for us to wrap up. Thank you, Jodi, for your time and for your insights. And my challenge for people listening is that the things or a number have undoubtedly risen up to say this is what that would be for me, or this is what life would look like if it was a little bit more to my liking. Then take the first step. Do what the first natural thing is to make that to be more present in your life. So it's a really nice way to wrap up. Before we do, where can people find you or find out more about 4,000 Mondays, Jodi?
Oh, I appreciate you even asking that. You just said it. 4000mondays.com. I live inside the internet there, and there are resources there and fun stuff. So that's where to find me.
Look, thank you so much. Time's a finite resource, and mine hasn't been wasted in having this time with you and spending the time talking about how do we make it work and make it matter. So thanks for your time. It's been great having you on.
Oh, this has been time well spent indeed. Thank you.
Two quick things before we wrap up. If you've enjoyed this episode and want to access the full list of show notes or explore some other episodes, simply visit andrewhorsfield.com. And please consider forwarding this episode to someone that you think would benefit. It will not only be appreciated by the person you choose, but help spread the word and amplify the impact I'm trying to make for the podcast. Thanks for listening.